One. You are live tonight with Penergic Life.
Hey, welcome back to the SCIF. We switched to a Saturday today, this week, because we had a expedition in the Superior National Forest that we just finished up with this morning, and it was a great expedition. We had a lot of fun. Um, we were out there with some military veteran kids, and Jamie, our therapist, was along with us, and uh, we also had Libby, who was along with us, who was a teacher, and it turned out to be a really good experience. We picked a trail that basically uh, highlighted a major river going into Lake Superior, and it was up, down, up, down. You're in the mountains up there north of Lutzen, and it was just a beautiful trip. And it was a challenging trip for the girls involved. They impressed they impressed the hell out of us. We thought this trip was really, really going to push them, and it did push them. But very, very little complaints out of any of it. I think at the end they felt really rewarded. They did a one rope bridge. We may be doing some videos of that. Very, very fun. They got some medical training, and they all just took to this thing. And it's funny because a lot of them were not. They've never been exposed to hiking and were first time out in the woods hiking with the ruck. Some had, but it was a great experience. We spent 2 days, or 2 nights and 3 days we spent out in the woods and hiking this trail. And it was not an easy trail. So these girls can be, and they were all females, by the way. They can be very, very proud of what they did because that trail was no joke. And we had a great time. You want to put some of your comments to that, Chris?
Yeah. Um, so the trail was very demanding. And one of the things that kind of impressed me was they took to the training. They caught on to it
Mm-hmm.
really fast. I think you made the comment earlier today about uh, them picking up everything that was, you know, they picked it up very quickly, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And they started helping each other at the beginning. They were really helpful to each other throughout the whole thing, but when it came to the training specific stuff, they really kind of jumped together, and on the second day they just kind of really kind of molded it and just ran with it, and they did very good, especially tying the Swiss seat. So uh,
I I
that
have to
was
tell you that gets you turned around, tying knots, and it can get you turned around pretty quick. And these girls picked up on this, and they
yeah
were helping each other and sending sending the next one down to get on the rope. And the seats were right. I mean, I was really, really impressed. And we also did some tourniquets. We did a trauma class, like a basic trauma class. So we did. there's there's Sam.
yeah
That we told Sam we were going to get pancakes after. Sam was one of the participants in this trip, and Sam just knocked it out of the ballpark. So I hope she enjoyed it. We definitely enjoyed being there with all of them, and it was a great trip. But yeah, they picked up on some of these things, and it was very impressive to me, anyways. And you know what else, Chris? None of them really, none of them turned on one another. They all supported one another in ways. And
yeah
I can recall when I was younger, and when things start getting tough, you want to start snapping at one another and everything else. And we didn't see any of that. It was a very impressive trip. I'm very pleased with how everybody performed and how the trip turned out. It was very, very nice, and it was an enjoyable experience.
yeah, that's a good point, man. They There was none of that infighting, and I think this for the first time for some of them being out there, I think that
Mm-hmm.
they really did well, and I think they can progress from here.
Oh
So,
yeah.
and we can definitely together as a team, make it more demanding for them and more team driven events. And I think that any of those girls would actually did very well in a more demanding and more strenuous environment.
But
So
man, that
yeah,
being
kudos.
said, that trail is no joke. That is a a difficult trail to say the least. I mean, it's not mega long, but it's lined with roots and rocks, and it has some severe elevation changes that are constant. It's not like you just have a few; they're constant. So you're going up, down, and up and down. There's some breathtaking scenery. The river's beautiful. You get
Yep.
way above the river, you look down upon a gorge, and it is phenomenal. And you got to the end of that, and just impressed and very, very pleased with how everything went. So, Sam, I hope you had fun. You did great,
Yep.
and
Good job.
you'll do great in anything you decide to do. So,
Yep.
um, go ahead, Chris.
That there's more to be. I mean, more to be said about all that. So it was just a great experience for us too, and I think it rewarding us for our from our perspective. Something that kind of puts us together as a team is you and I sharing the same concepts, and those things are, you know, training and teamwork and esprit de corps and all that stuff that we bring to the table that can be passed on. So when we initially did the trail, we did it pretty fast, but when we programmed everything out, we just came up with this great movement plan and great execution for everybody. The campsites were nice, a little crowded the one night, but people got everything sorted out. So, um, if you're if you're on these campsites, there's a certain etiquette on the campsites for anybody that's ever done this sort of thing. And somebody hollering at you in the middle of the night is not very good etiquette. So, just for the dude that if he ever watches this, I probably don't want to holler at us again, bud. Okay, so
we had
that
there was a group of people that were there and sort of took over one portion of the camp, and they were going out and hiking and coming back, which whatever. I mean, I don't know if they're necessary,
yeah,
but they pretty much took over one whole side of the camp, and the night was surprisingly cold the first night out, and we ended up having to build a fire in the middle of the night, and of course people start talking a little bit. Some guy got out there and Dakota. Yeah. I think you learn more about yourself, and it's hard. That's exactly right.
yep,
Good point. Good
yep,
point. And it got extreme. There's Sam. Tons of fun. Good. I'm glad you had fun, Sam. You did
excellent,
great.
yep,
You did great. Yeah, and conquering some fears too. Getting up on a one rope bridge for the first time is it takes a little bit of courage, especially people that are new to this whole experience. You've got that feeling of weightlessness as you're pulling yourself across a river with rapids going below you. So it's it was fun. I enjoyed it a lot, but we endured some things, and I think that's what makes the best stories always come out of when it sucks. And
yeah,
that night sucked. It was cold. Everybody was cold. We underpacked. Everybody pretty much did. We got a fire going and worked our way through it. We made some changes, and the next night wasn't as bad. It was almost as cold, but it wasn't as bad because we made some changes around it. And we also changed what camp we were going to go into as well on the fly. And we got really lucky with the second camp, and it worked out perfect.
yep,
So,
yep,
so it was a great trip all around. There was some adversity. That's what makes things great. And I think that's what people remember. Wow, that sucked. Even we talk about that stuff, how bad things suck. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. We're going to continue on the selection and the Q course. And we're going to talk about phase 2 tonight. But you always remember the times when it sucked and you worked your way through it, you pushed your way through it. A lot of these kids did that. They all did. And kudos to them. It was a great trip.
Yeah, that Dakota asked how heavy were the rucks. Well,
They varied.
it,
They're
yeah,
they're
they
they're
varied.
pretty heavy.
We carried everything in, food, water, all of our camping gear and all that stuff. Dakota and Matt and I were probably the heaviest because we had the 150-foot static line and the gear to do the one rope bridge. So we passed the static rope around, and there was a few who carried it, and then um, we shared the rest of the gear and stuff like that. But I think Matt and I were probably pushing 50, maybe.
And maybe a little heavier than that, 50, 60 pounds. We
Yeah,
carried medical gear in too. So
medical gear. Yeah,
we
yeah.
carried a bunch. One thing I kind of want to talk about, and it was our sort of first run with it, and I'm pretty happy with how it worked out. We didn't have to use it, fortunately, but we use, and we suggest anybody who goes out into the wilderness use a locating beacon, and we use one called Spot X. And the Spot X device is not just a locating beacon for emergency services, but the Spot X device allows you to text via satellite. Wait a second. I carried the
So,
rope all day. Sam did. Sam carried
yeah.
the static rope all day. It was supposed to go on to everybody, and Sam wanted to carry it. So she ended up carrying it all day, one of the first day for sure,
Yeah.
and a little bit of the second day too. What did Dakota just ask?
He says, I think he's what's going. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
But
you.
you,
I
here's
think you
the,
suck them away. Oh yeah, it's yeah. That's you have to embrace it. We call in the military, we say embracing the suck when things really suck, and the cold just adds to that. And we're saying cold. It's the middle of July, but we're up in the Lutsen Mountains, and we're right off of Lake Superior. Lake Superior never gets above low 50s, and warm in the day. It's comfortable in the day, and that's one of the reasons why we chose the area. It's in the 70s, but the night got down to low 50s, and when you're out there in the low 50s without, Chris and I just went in a regular bivvy, and it's kind of maybe shame on us a little bit, but and poncho liners, but
yeah.
but it was cold. I mean, it was cold. Even if you had a sleeping bag, it was cold, and but it adds to the adventure for sure. But I'm going to get back to that spot
Yeah.
locating device. This device allows us to use a this spot device allows us to use texting. So it's instead of carrying a satellite phone with you, you can carry this device with you. You can text to emergency services. So it's not just, hey, I've got a problem and something's going on. It's here's the specific problem. Now they're going to know where you're at. Okay. But how do they know what you need? Maybe you need a medevac, right? Maybe you don't. Maybe you need to meet somebody at a specific trailhead. If you can get somebody to that point, that's why it's kind of nice to have the one that allows you to text. Now you have to sign up for a service for it, but even if you don't get that, get a locating beacon. There's a couple companies. I think Garmin got into the business now, but Spot was pretty much the pioneer of it. And it's a great. You shouldn't. In fact, I'm going to say this: you shouldn't go in to the wilderness without one. Period. It's very easy to get lost in the woods. Even on marked trails. If you stick to trail maps that you think are good and they close a portion of the trail, there's all these spurs leading into trails, and you can just take a wrong one of those once. Chris and I go and recon the trail ahead of time, but we've been bitten by this. Now we use topo maps, backup GPS. We have a pace plan. I'll explain that in a little bit, what a pace plan is, but it's primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. We have redundancies built in, but the Spot device is a great device to have, and you're always in communication with emergency services. You can be very,
Hey,
very
Matt.
specific as to what your emergency is. Yes, Chris.
Hey, we have a weapons question here that I'm going to throw up right now. So
Okay.
um, let's take a look at this and dive into
Okay.
this for a few minutes. So
What pistol, sniper rifle, and assault rifle did you guys use when we were on the teams? Um, well, that varies. A bunch of different ones, actually.
yeah,
We we used obviously M4s. We used Mark 18s. We used Berets. Uh, we used uh, we used
I
308s, which was what the M24 was. That the
yeah
308 we had. That was
yeah
the 700 Remington 700 based in a I think an Accuracy International chassis, I believe.
I think you're right.
Pistols, we used various pistols. We used everything from Beretta to the Glock to the Kimber. Uh, I don't have anything bad to say about any of those. And what
The
else? What else did we
the
use?
Beretta, that
Oh,
92, I
yeah.
used that uh, for quite some time, and
Hmm.
it since it was the only thing that was there for us, that, well, we switched out later on, but I'd probably never pick one of those up again.
Yeah,
So
the Brett is a fine gun, but
it
it's a
is,
big, heavy
it is.
gun. Yeah, it's got the decocker up on the slide. I think they've changed that at this stage, but we were also. This is a little bit of a unique story. We were going to be one of the first teams to use the SCAR when it came out, and Chris canked that, and for good reason too. And a lot of people ended up not liking the SCAR. We were primarily going to be rocking the SCAR heavies, which were the 308 at the time. And when we turned it down initially, it went to another team, and they had some teething issues. The SCAR is not a bad gun. I don't own one personally. I think they're asking way too much money for one of those things. And besides, I don't know what the SCAR does that's better than a regular M4. And here's the funny thing when the question he asked is everybody always assumes that special operations guys are gun guys. Now, Chris and I are gun guys, and we had some other gun guys on the team. But most special operations guys are not gun guys. They shoot what they're issued, and they learn how to shoot that extremely well because they're shooting them all the time. And they are not as well versed as some of the civilian population is. Um, but that being said, we did get to play with a bunch of cool stuff. We had optics. We had all different optics that we could choose, from EOTechs to aim points to Trijicon to loophole. We had U.S. optics, Night Force, and all different stuff that we had. LCANs, and so it's we usually gravitated towards something that we liked at the time. I liked the not, why am I drawing a blank here? L3 Communications, the EOTech. I like the EOTech.
EOTech, yeah.
It had a circle dot reticle. EOTech then was involved in a lawsuit where they were having thermal shift. So if you're at the bottom of a mountain, you zero your gun, you get to the top of the mountain, and it would move when it got cold. So anyways, I liked the EOTech for the simple reason it had a reticle, and the circle dot reticle, which gave you the hold off for when you're doing CQB versus if you were shooting a little bit farther out. So I used to use the bottom of the circle for CQB, and obviously the dot for farther out when we did a 25 300 0. But played with a lot of stuff. None of the stuff is really. I Mark 18 is a Mark 18. It's a short barrel, 10.3-inch upper. It's not a whole rifle what civilian world thinks it is. And it originally was a Colt, not a Daniel Defense. Now it's Daniel Defense. And we were issued Daniel Defenses as well. But it's just an upper. And when I went to the National Guard, we had 416s there too. We didn't have 416s in 5th Group. But when I went to the National Guard afterward, I went to 20th Group for a little while, and we did have 416s there. But I don't know how you beat just a good old quality M4. If I could build my own today, I would rather do that. But but you wouldn't be allowed to bring your own gun over. You wouldn't get it back. You could bring it over, but you'd never get it back. But anyways, I do want to. I know that Sam is watching again. Sam, you really did a great job. I just want to, you and your sister both. And you know what we talked about. You asked some questions about the military and stuff, and we really think you would excel pretty much anything you want to do. So if you have any more questions, you know how to get a hold of Chris and I. Feel free to ask us anything you need, and we'd be more than happy to help.
You're to the awareness with Chris on the weapons. You're gonna shoot a lot of stuff, so you really got to find out what works for you as far as sights is concerned. But I'm in agreement with Matt on this. The scars were a total no-go, but a good old M4 is what. And a lot of people will say that, well, that's what you guys shot, and now it's something new. Well, here's the thing, Matt and I've been dealing with this for a while, and we always seem to come across different stuff, but we always seem to go back to the good old 5.56, and it's held true. And plus, I mean, the Army spent millions of dollars trying to get more get better impact out of it at longer ranges because this was being reported, and I don't have anything like that to report about that, and I just don't know where that's coming from. But
well, what Chris is talking about it, they retooled M855. So green tip at CQB distances, there was a lot of controversy over it because of Geneva rules, Geneva regulations, and they did M855 with M855A1, and unfortunately, Chris and I never used that stuff because it came out after we were both out. But from all intents and purposes, that solves any problem that there might have been at CQB distances, and it still performs at long distance. I know they're playing around with 6.8 right now. The M4, it's like one of these things that I don't think it's ever going away, and I don't think 5.56 is going away. It's a great all-around setup. It's simple, and Chris and I always keep it simple. Simple is usually the better way because it's easier to get everybody up to speed, and anytime you start adding complexities to things, did you guys carry CLP? Yeah, everybody in the Army carries CLP.
Yeah.
Is it the best stuff out there? No. Does it work? Yeah. You keep an M4 wet, it runs. So,
hey Matt, this is you'll appreciate this question right here because you and I have talked about this for a lot.
Okay, because of lack of length and 10 point. Now and that's a great point, Chris, because the dwell time to get the gun to function in a 10.3. Here's the deal: because of the Geneva Convention, and we run green tip, which is a penetrator. You can't run hollow point. You cannot run the quality of ammo that you can buy as a civilian and run as a civilian. So the better the ammo that you're using, the better the hollow points, the better the frangible. They rely on velocity more than anything. And the 10.3's velocity is not the greatest, but because you're running green tip, it really doesn't affect the military so much. Now, I know there's a lot of police units that want to go to the Mark 18 upper, or Daniel Defense sells them a whole gun. They call them Mark 18. Mark 18 is only an upper, by the way, but it's not an appropriate gun for law enforcement, in my opinion, for the simple reason law enforcement can use any round out there they want. They can use anything from 45 all the way up to 77 grain, hollow point, bonded, frangible, anything they want. You can't. You're limited in the military to M855 and 55 grain practice ammo, which is M193. But 10.3 provides more of an issue in the civilian world than it does in the military world. People think that the 10.3 inch barrel was to CQB. No, the primary benefit, it does make doing CQB a little easier, but you can do plenty of CQB with the 14.5, okay, which is what the length of the M4 is. The 10.3 works better when you're in an up armored vehicle, and you can maneuver it a little bit easier. And that is the main benefit to, despite what a lot of people think in the civilian world, to why a lot of the special operations teams run the 10.3. If I had my druthers and I could only have one rifle, what length do you think that would be, Chris?
I think you like that 12 and a half a lot.
12.5. That's the way to go, because it's short enough where it's very, very maneuverable, and it's long enough where you get good velocity out of that gun, whatever round you're running. But thank you for the question.
Hey, we got another question from Randall right here that
Okay.
you and I have also spent a lot of time talking about. So, and
How do I feel about 7.62 by 3.9 or 300 blackout? Cool options. I love 7.62 by 3.9. I think it is an affordable round. I think it's a hard hitting round. It's not a long distance round, but it's a 0 to 300 round in most cases. In an exceptional rifle like an M4 platform, push that out to 400 yards. Fantastic round. And as it's proving right now, you can still get 7.62 by 3.9. We're starting to see what's coming through as far as availability, and 7.62 by 3.9 is far more available than just about any other major round that you'd run in an M4 type chassis, an AR-15. 300 blackout is great if you're going to go suppressed, although there's some options with 7.62 by 3.9. I prefer 7.62 by 3.9. It hits harder than 300 blackout. I think it's more readily available, and it's cheaper, which is the big thing with me. And now there's suppressed. There's heavy subsonic rounds that are work very, very well suppressed. So for me, if I had to have a choice between those two, I think there are some benefits, and 300 blackout is cool. It was made to be suppressed. It was made to run from an 8.5-inch barrel. I like 7.62 by 3.9 because we get back to that simplicity. It's simple, it's easy, it's cheap, and it does its job.
And one of the other reasons we like it too is Matt mentioned it was ready available, but when you think about where this round came from and how many rifles have been manufactured with this barrel and this capability, I mean, it far exceeds what your expectations would be when you first start looking into it. So this ammo is available right now. I recommend, and I think Matt will agree with me on this, that you probably need to invest in one, an AR platform in this caliber, and probably think about suppressing it, and probably think about stocking up on ammo, because ammo is going to be readily available. It's relatively easy to suppress, as Matt mentioned, and it's not going anywhere. It's going to be around for a while. So,
and if you hunt, it's a very capable hunting round too.
That's a good point
for small game and deer.
Yep. One of the things I want to mention, I think Savage actually makes a boat action in this 7.62 by 3. I think I've seen that a few years ago. I'm pretty sure it is, but I'm not really up on Savage stuff. But I believe it. It was either I think it was this and 300 blackout. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
But if you hunt deer, if you hunt wild hogs down south, it's humane, effective, affordable, available round. So it meets all the criteria. And if you like to run AR platforms, it's just plays right into that as well.
Here's another question.
Do you think body then you will need a better round penetrated? Yeah, I think they're already experimenting with that right now. I think that's part of the reason why they're looking to push towards 308 penetrator, and now the 6.8. I always want to say SPC, but it's not 6.8 SPC. It's a new 6.8 that they're competing with. And it's a very valid point, and we know technology today has gone far past from the equipment that Chris and I used to get. Civilians are getting better equipment than Chris and I got back then, and it was state of the art, the stuff that we were getting. So I want to jump into SUT here a little bit, because we said we were going to talk about this, and Chris and I both have our own unique stories. Chris went through SUT long before I did. So his experience is a little bit different than mine. Both equally interesting, I believe, and that you can be the judge of that in our own special ways. And we know we've talked about how they've changed the course here recently. SUT, which stands for Small Unit Tactics, and is known as Phase 2 in the Q course, and it's the first, if you're not in the SOBC program or the SF Baby program, which is what SOBC used to be called. It's the first course that you're going to take going actually in the Q course. Selection is selection. Selection determines whether you're going to be permitted to continue to the Q course. So you go into Phase 2, and I will say Phase 2 traditionally was the biggest ass kicker in the Q course. It was 8 weeks long when I went through, and the rucks get ungodly heavy, and you're.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Let's tackle this question real quick, and then we can move on.
Sure. What's the question?
This is the first part of it right here.
You guys were in a previous podcast talking about women in SF. When I was going through basic training in 2010, I knew 2 females who were trying out for the female engagement teams. Yeah. Okay.
This is the second part of that. I think this is really the question.
Yes. A short answer, Chris. Yes. The female engagement teams were great because, especially as we're in different places overseas, and there are gender sensitive issues. For example, in the Arab world or in the Middle East, men dealing with females isn't really culturally appropriate. And when you're working with indigenous forces with and through, sometimes you need to bring in specialists in this. And those female engagement teams were very, very effective. And I am all about those units. Our issue, and I don't want people to misconstrue what we were talking about. In units like SF, in units like Navy SEALs, in units like MARSOC, and even pararescue, the physical demands of that job do not fall into the capabilities of most men, let alone women. And I think it's unfair to everybody when you have to lower standards. And we're shooting it straight because women are the equal in men in just about everything. There's certain things that men can do that maybe they excel at the physical type of stuff that the other areas women can excel. Okay, so everybody has their niche in what they do. Okay, you're not going to make men in these engagement teams, for example. But and here's the way I look at it right now. If you want to open it up to women, you don't lower the standards. Okay? You cannot lower the standards. And this is what they've done from Marine infantry all the way down. And that's my issue. And I'm sort of deviating from your question. The female engagement teams are phenomenal. They're great. I wasn't aware that they weren't around anymore. But that is an excellent special operations role for women in that is very effective. And it serves a purpose that it's needed. Do you have anything to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, real quick. So the female engagement teams are a good asset, although they may not be needed as much now as they did then. But that's something that was really an evolution that took place because as the war moved on and evolved, there was a lot of targets that were female, and they were wearing suicide vests and everything else, man. So it wasn't just the Arab men that were, ISIS and Al Qaeda that were fighting against Americans. It was also women. So it makes sense to have an engagement team that can do some interrogation techniques or speak Arabic and do the basic stuff that is required to either gain information or gain intel from women just as much as men. Sure.
Yeah.
And that's just long and short of it.
That point that you just said, gain intel, is going to be more effective for women who are trained to do that.
Sure.
That's what we do. But working with women over there is kind of a taboo for a man that's not related. And it's very difficult. And Chris is exactly right. A lot of issues with suicide bombers and this and that. And many times these women, cultural issues are used with them, and they are coerced, or if not straight up forced, into these positions.
Yeah.
And female engagement teams are, I believe, a tremendous asset to that is needed. And I just want to keep going back to that. Our issue is not necessarily women being there. It's lowering the standards to get women in there. And they've destroyed the Q course because this is what they did. And it was done for political correctness, not for the betterment of anybody. And it's not fair to anybody on those teams getting men that get through these lowered standards. Okay, so this should be something that people work for. Not saying that it takes superhuman people to do this, because superhuman people don't exist. But we want people that endure. And that's the guys who get into special operations. They're the guys who are able to endure, take it, keep going, and achieve physical and mental demands that you didn't think were possible. That's the type of people that get into these units. And you can sit and say, this unit is better than that one. They're all elite, and everybody has a different, they're all fantastic. So I don't care whether it's the Air Force, the Army, Navy, Marines, it does not matter. These are elite units for a reason. It's because people have to push themselves to unbelievable heights in order to get into these. And if they don't, then it's no longer a special unit. And this is what they're turning them into.
I mentioned this last time. So the SFAS was kind of key to School for Advanced Suffering. Do you think about this? Do you really suffer in your day-to-day life? Yeah, some people call suffering like, well, I didn't get my coffee from Starbucks or something like that. That's not suffering. All right. Mm-hmm. When you go a week or 2 weeks without coffee, now you're kind of creeping up on something, that could be very slightly coined as suffering, but not really. Okay. So when your suffering begins, when you're mentally and physically just totally broken off, that's when really the suffering starts. And that's where you find out that you can endure a lot more than what you think you can. And part of what Matt and I did this expedition here is this one we were just talking about earlier is we kind of related some of that stuff to what we did in the past in Special Forces and applied some of that knowledge here. And granted that we did not walk that fast, but because of the terrain. But there's a specific way that you walk on terrain, because you don't want me or Matt falling down, twisting our ankle, and not be able to carry our stuff. And then we got 2 or 3 other people that have been slowed down. So there's all this detailed stuff that goes into that, and you gotta think. And when you're enduring, sometimes you can't think, but other times you just learn to do that. So with that comes, this is my final thought on this, is lowering the standard does not, I say this again, does not make people endure, so they don't know what their limits are. That's what the problem is here. Lowering the standards is the problem. Okay? Mm-hmm. Humans are humans. Don't lower the standard. And that's exactly what these guys got. And
I think Chris and I both agree. If women want to try out, have at it. Try out. It's got to be the same standard. And I don't want the men getting through that can't meet that standard. Okay, yeah. So if they are going to get the opportunity to try out, keep it at the same standard, and it works for everybody. That way, if everybody gets through at that same standard, you know that the teams are getting people that they can rely on. Okay, if you don't have the same standard, what's going to happen when you get into Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere else that they may be sent in the world, and things get really, really tough, and these people haven't been pushed to that point, and they decide they're going to quit. Well, they're letting the whole team down. They're putting that whole team at risk. If they can't carry what they need to carry, if they can't execute a violence of action that's needed when they're doing CQB, if other people have to come and deal with them because they can't handle their role, what does that do to the rest of the team? It makes the team ineffective. Now,
Yeah.
this brings us back to what we've been trying to get to here, phase 2,
Yeah.
SUT. And what I was trying to say before, phase 2 is the first course that you take that's officially the Q course. And it's small unit tactics. You work a lot with the Ranger handbook. You're learning how to do ambushes. You're learning how to respond to ambushes. You're learning how to run your own mission everywhere, everything from the op order, the warning order, the op order, to the execution of the mission, and working with your guys. And it is stressful because this is where the rucks start getting super heavy, because you're going out into the field and you're running these missions, and you're carrying, they're blanks at this stage, but you're carrying all the equipment. You're carrying the crew served weapons. You're carrying the tripods and the pintles for the crew served weapons. You're carrying ammo, even though it's blanks. You're carrying ammo. You're carrying radio equipment. You're just like you were operating a real mission. So in phase 2, your ruck is never under 160 pounds. It just never is. And phase 2 is also where, you're moving from point A to point B. You get inserted into the field for your big field exercise. Now, phase 2 is 8 weeks long, but and it's got the biggest attrition rate traditionally. So more people get lost to phase 2 than any other portion of the Q course, just because it is. And not just that what you're learning is difficult, because it's basically not. It's simple, small unit tactics. It's not difficult, but it's difficult for somebody who's new to this, putting everything together and pulling an L-shaped ambush off with perfection, right? This is what you want to do. I'm giving an example here. But they put you under extreme duress. So they're very, very hard on you, as far as they smoke the snot at you, okay? But when you get pushed out into the field, you go out for 2 weeks at a time. You don't have food. Maybe get an MRE a day, maybe. And you go on these smoker rucks from point A to point B, and you keep on running your missions. You're taking turns, and people are running, and they ultimately get tested. And this is where people fail. They fail their mission. So you're not allowed to wear cold weather gear. You're not allowed to wear rain gear or anything along those lines. And I remember when the testing phase, when I went out, it started raining as soon as we exfilled. Some people jump in, some people exfil off a truck. We exfilled off a truck, and it started raining as soon as we set foot on the ground. Yeah, we're going out for 2 weeks, and
You infilled.
Yes, we infilled.
Yep, you said exfil, but you meant infill.
Oh, did I say exfil?
Yeah.
Okay, we infilled.
Yeah, infilled.
we infilled. Good catch there. And we spent 2 weeks out there running our missions, and limited food, limited sleep. You hardly get any sleep. You just keep running missions. Everybody's got to go through. Sometimes you would lie in something called a wagon wheel while other people are setting up their mission. And I can remember one particular case where it was raining and it was cold. It was in the early spring, and down at Bragg, the winter and the spring are cold. It's a damp cold. It's not like a cold up north, but it's a damp cold. It's cold. And we were there forever while this individual was trying to set his mission up. And we were there, we're waiting, and we're in that wagon for hours. I mean, I'm not kidding. Hours, middle of the night, raining, cold, soaking wet. And this is where you start to feel hypothermia start to take place. And I think I talked about this over this past weekend when I was talking about hypothermia, and I used this story. But it's weird when you start to get hypothermia, because my experience with it is, and I know people experience hypothermia in different ways, but my experience with hypothermia is you start to feel like you're a little bit drunk. but you're aware of what's going on around you. For example, you'd be laying to the guy next to you and you'd be like, man, it's cold. Are you cold? And you're asking the same question over and over and over again. He says, yeah, it's cold. Yeah, I'm cold. Are you cold? And this goes on, and you know that you've asked this, and you know it's stupid, right? But this is how you start to go into that. You have to recognize this when it's happening. And then we had one guy just stand up and start walking around in a circle. And like I said, everybody responds differently. And obviously, when somebody's reaching hypothermia, now it's becoming a life-threatening situation. You've got to get that individual warm. So the guy that got up and started running around in circles, they grabbed him and brought him over to a fire while this went out. But this just goes on. So finally you do your mission. You've got these heavy rucks, and you get smoked across, from one point to another point to do somebody else's mission, or to maybe get an hour's worth of sleep. But you're happy to go on the smoker ruck with the heavy ruck on your back just because you're moving and you're generating body heat. But this is another situation that is common to the Q course. When you are rucking with quite a few people, yes, you can get peered at any point in the Q course, Dakota. When you're in a group of people, you smell an ammonia type smell in the air. And this is something that you get used to. Chris knows where I'm going with this.
Yep.
That smell is people's muscle mass burning off. Their body is burning. Their body's cannibalizing itself because you're pushing yourself so hard. You're not replacing that nutrition that you need because you're limited. So your body starts to cannibalize itself, and it eats your body mass, it eats your muscle mass. And the odor that's given off as your body cannibalizes on itself is that ammonia type smell. And that's a smell you got to recognize quite a bit in the Q course. I mean, it was quite often quite common to be dealing with that in multiple phases. But that was one of the things I remembered. And one of the other issues that they do here to really push you is they like to ambush you in the middle of one of these movements from point A to point B. And they start throwing these things called arty sims. So they're artillery simulators. So next thing you know, a bunch of cadre appear. These artillery simulators are going off, which are like fireworks more than anything else, like little explosions. And they walk through and say, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. Well, now we don't leave people behind, right? So you've got this 160-pound ruck on your back and some 200-pound dude who's told he's dead. So he's got a 160-pound ruck, right? And he's got his weapon. He's got his weapon and everything else that he's carrying. And you've got to get all that out of there because that's sensitive equipment, right? Somebody has to take his ruck. Somebody has to take him. So next thing you know, you're throwing a dude that's maybe 200 pounds up on your back on top of your 160-pound ruck, and you've got to run off the objective. And we don't know how far you have to run until the instructors tell you, until the instructors are tired. It's pretty much how you, so it could be a half mile, it could be a mile, who knows? But when you're pushed to exhaustion like this and things like that happen, this is real. But these are to simulate things that'll happen in real life. And it sounds like we're trying to be dramatic with this or anything else. I don't know too many people that can do that. You know, you're talking 300 pounds on your back and running off an objective for maybe as long as a mile. Usually not that far, but could be. These are things, and this is why people get broken in the Q course. But doing this for the better part of 2 years, and then all the mental stuff they put on top of you with the foreign language and everything else, it takes a toll, and you have to be committed to do that. And people have always snaked through, and some people that probably shouldn't have gotten through would have always. I don't care what unit that is, but in general, when you made it through this whole thing, I mean, you take it like your 25-meter target. We always say this is your closest and your nearest goal, right? So selection, when you're there, your 25-meter target is to pass your pass all your events. As you build, get through team week. Those are your, then get through team week, get through that big ruck at the end. Okay. Well, you get into phase 2, you do the same thing. Then if you look at it a little bit bigger, you're just there for the moment. And each one of these achievements is a victory. It's a personal victory that makes you want to keep going, right? I'm committed. There's no way I'm quitting. There is no way I'm going to even allow a medical to stop me, right? I'm going to finish this. And those are the type of people we want. Not necessarily the people where things come easy to them, the people that push through and don't care. They're going no matter what. You're not going to stop. So that's what we want.
I mentioned this last I don't know, a couple weeks ago when we were on one of our SCIFs here, that you disconnect from it, and that's exactly what my point was about that, is what Matt was just describing. When the pain starts, as that pain gradually gets worse, the more and more you want to disconnect from it. But the achievement also, the award, the achievement at the end is way better than anything you can imagine. That's the best part about this. You're saying, you know what? I did that. I endured that. And that's where the rights to brag about this stuff comes in. And you're really not bragging about anything. It's not bragging. It's the right. It's a rite of passage. Okay. And then when you take away from that, it starts. It upsets me. It upsets Matt. And when we've talked to some guys, that it upsets them too. So, it's taken away from our heritage. And our heritage has been typically the guys that think outside the box, may be a little rebellish, all right, but are just downright good freaking warriors, and they just know what they can do. And they've been to those physical and mental limits, and those are the type of guys that I want beside me. And I know Matt would say that too, and that's exactly why Matt and I are here today. And
yeah, you want people that pass the same standards that you passed, that have passed one of the hardest things you can physically do over a long period of time. It's not that you're committed for a short period of time. You're committed to a long period of time where you're pushed mentally, physically, right? Even the language, okay? The language isn't a physical push. It's a mental push. But you get 6 months to learn, depending on what language you're given, up to a level 4 language, either Mandarin, Chinese, or Arabic. And it's the DLPT one. You have to get a 1+1. And that's reading, speaking, and writing. That is commitment to do that. The normal course where you have to get the same scores, okay, where you get sent to be a linguist, you get 2 years of training. Well, you don't get that in the Q course. Now they've removed that out of the Q course. So that's another element. Now I know one of the comments was made, well, we can't get the people to sign up to go and do it. Well, that's too damn bad.
Yeah.
We were told from the very beginning when we did this, you can't mass produce a Green Beret, and you can't. So if people, I would rather have fewer people that are committed to do this than to plus up the ranks to satisfy some politician's goal of the number of ODAs that might be out there. Because I tell you what, you've watered it completely down. So if you have ineffective ODAs out there, and maybe this is the goal to begin with, because Big Army, we've established, hates SF and special operations. What's the whole purpose of them if you water them down? You can just go back and have an infantry unit do it, right? That's the goal of all of this. And some of these special units they're trying to put together out of infantry. So I think they're winning, unless the public really stands up and gets a hold of their congressman. I think they're winning. But do you have any specific phase 2 stories you want to clarify and anything? I was very broad. I wasn't specific about everything that phase 2 does, but I'm sure some of our watchers would like to hear your take on phase 2, what it is, and some of your experiences, Chris.
Yeah, sure. So it's not only just a beat down when you get out there, but it's also one of the greatest learning experiences you'll have. So, and that's just not physical either, because here you get taught those small unit tactics that are gonna that really are the heart and soul of special forces because of our mission. And when you learn that stuff, you tend not to forget it, because you could there's a good chance you could possibly be carrying out one of those small unit tactic things, which Matt mentioned was the L-shaped ambush, or a recon or whatever. But all that stuff that you learned during that time is going to come into play at some point in your career if you stay in. And it's not only just what the tactic is, but the point to where you go from the start to the end of that tactic, and some of those methods that you use to get there. Those methods can be used elsewhere also. So all of this is a huge learning experience, and the instructors there are there to teach you, but at the same time they're there to pressure you. Okay, and when you start reaching that goal, because one of the goals of it is, can you execute this mission under extreme circumstances? Why is that? Why is that? You ask yourself. The extreme circumstances that you will be under are probably going to be extreme anyways. But the ability for you to think and carry out about that, think about the mission and carry out the mission from the beginning to the end under extreme circumstances. Imagine if the circumstances weren't that extreme, okay? Which they're never going to be just easy, because nothing in that world comes easy with that, because it's just that complicated. But at the end of the day, when you think about all the processes that you went through to get there, and you look back and you say, I endured that because I did it under extreme stress. I made all the right decisions under extreme stress, so I know that I can do this much. But don't get me wrong, it doesn't end there either. So I also mentioned this before about being competitive and learning new stuff. So the learning doesn't end there. All this is giving you the basis for the rest of your career in special forces. So that the basis, the fundamentals, the tactics, just all first line stuff where you got to know, and then you just adapt and you apply that to everything else that you do, all the missions you are going to do in special forces, and even beyond that. If you decide to get out, you're still going to be able to carry that back to somewhere else. So it's one of those things you don't forget. But the importance of the stress with executing something that, like the ambush, is a learning process. So you learn it, and you pretty much don't ever forget it. So the situation is twofold for everything. They're beating it in your head. You can't forget it under extreme stress, and you continue to use those processes as you extend your career in SF. So, to me, I was not an infantry guy when I first came to Special Forces. I was an engineer, but I did a lot of small unit tactics. So I had some experience with it. I wouldn't say I was the best at it, but when I picked up all the information, I said, you know what, this is cool. I can do it. So I applied myself, and just like Matt said, I dove into the books. I listened to the instructors. And one of the biggest takeaways from the instructor is, listen to me this is how I want it done. Okay, that's simple, right? That's simple instruction stuff. Hey, do it like this. Step 1 through step 50, if it is, do it like this, and you will succeed. So you learn it like that. Okay, this is the proper way to do it. And he takes you through that step by step. Our instructor, he walked through it, he talked through it, we rehearsed it, and he gave us all those times. But that wasn't stressful. The stress started when Matt was talking about going out of the field for those 2 weeks and applying that stress to what you've already learned to see if you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had a good time there. Learning? Did I have a good time executing? No, because I was under stress. But that was one of them stressors. You just learn to deal with it, and you move on.
And
So
you come back to the shittiest times you had, and those are your stories. And that's
yeah,
you get the most enjoyment out of recalling
yeah,
those
yeah,
stories. And we were trying to impart that this past weekend. Yeah, it sucked being cold, but guess what? You made it through.
yeah,
And if you fall out during a mission, absolutely they used to kick you out. I don't know what they're doing
yeah,
today. Everything is upside down.
yeah.
You were gone. Um, you were gone. You were gone for reasons that were even unexplained. Phase two had such a big washout rate; it was just unreal. And they really, they hurt you when they smoked you, and there'd be dudes crying, and I'm not exaggerating. There would be dudes crying when they were going through these sessions, and dudes would quit just from that. So it was huge washout rate. It's traditionally been that way just because you're miserable. You're miserable for 8 weeks. Awareness with Chris. Not sure why they've considered getting rid of the CRF teams because of wanting to get back to UW and FID. I think he's talking about the commanders and extremist teams. SF has done recon and DA during Vietnam, aka Saga Mega Sigma, and Project Delta, all SF teams. Correct. Um, I'm glad you brought that up because Chris and I were even talking, and I don't quite understand why they're getting rid of the SCIF teams. The Commanders and Extremist Force. I'm scratching my head. Why are they doing this? But here's awareness with Chris. Here is the thing that I think people need to get their head wrapped around, and we've touched on it before, and I don't want to sound like a broken record with it. But Big Army absolutely hates Special Forces. They hate them. And Special Forces sort of sold themselves out, okay? You know where I'm going with this, Chris, right?
Yeah.
They sold themselves out because Special Forces needs to be away. They're unconventional. They need to be away from other units. And they need to be on their own because when you go into Special Forces, the rest of the military is very, very regimented. Again, they have a strict way you do things, and they have a strict pecking order in how you do things. And for a big infantry unit, that's how it has to be done. But when you're on your own in a small team, such as an ODA, and you're working by, with, through a foreign partner force, right? Or you're collecting intel, which is what it really is what you're doing. You're collecting intel, and you're putting your own missions together. You're developing your own missions. You need to think 180 degrees differently than how you would think if you were on an infantry in an infantry unit. Okay, and you have to start thinking on the ground. An infantry unit does things by force. Okay, there is nothing that is going to stop a U.S. Army or U.S. Marines infantry unit. You talk about a massive show of force. That's it right there. Okay, special operations teams don't operate that way. You're using guerrilla warfare. You're using, small. You're using intel that you're gathering to try to find facilitators and people with the heads of the snake and do surgical little small units, and you're trying to build your partner force up so they run those units as well. Well, because special operations gets a lot of money, they also get a lot of the glory because of Hollywood and everything. And in all actuality, nobody should know what operations are being run by who. That's the way it used to be, but now it's a big. These guys did this. These guys did that. It's exposing TTPs, which are targets, tactics, and procedures, right? And the I think big army needs to justify their existence, and they want the money that special operations gets, and they want the attention that special operations get, and they say, hey, we can do the same thing those guys can do, without really understanding what special operations is, because they've never thought out of that conventional box, right? So when looking at why they may have gotten rid of those teams, it just may be another way to destroy SF from within. And the whole command structure for SF. If you want to be an officer in SF, you've got to be captain promotable to begin with. So you are programmed regular army, and then you get to a team, and really you don't run the team when you're the captain. But when you're in the regular army, you're running your own unit, right? Well, when you get to SF, you're not running the team. The team sergeant's running the team. And quite often, the captain that gets to the team, who is considered the alpha, right? His only job is to represent the team to hire. But because he's been so regimented in his indoctrination into the military, right? He sometimes thinks that he comes to the team, the least experienced guy there, but somehow thinks that he is running the team. No. And that's where teams get in a lot of conflict with these officers. But these officers stay on a team for 18 months to 2 years, and then they get moved to a staff position. Okay? So sometimes they may never see combat, depending if we're in time of war, and sometimes they do see combat, right? But they go to a staff position, and eventually they'll get a company commander's position, which is a major, right? And then they may get a battalion commander, which is a lieutenant colonel. And if they're lucky, they get group commander. And if you're a group commander, that used to be as high as it went. So you had to be a dedicated officer if you wanted to go into SF, because you knew the highest you could ever possibly achieve, and it was going to be very, very difficult because you're the group commander, was colonel. Well, today, if you're a group commander, you're almost guaranteed to be a general. But if you're going to get your stars, you need to be seen. So when I said units need to be away from the other main units, right? Because otherwise they're influenced. The officers get influenced by the bigwigs in the regular army, pressured, coerced, and influenced. Okay, that's a better way to say it. And slowly you start becoming more conventional because you want to match their thinking, because you want your stars. So I've always said they made it so difficult for an enlisted, like a team sergeant, most experienced guys, to go officer. And they did that for a reason, okay? They did that because they protect their own. They don't want these enlisted guys, they're ones with all the experience, becoming an officer. They make you go through pretty much the whole Q course again. Who's going to do that? Very few people are going to do that when they're an experienced operator. And to be a team sergeant, you're an experienced operator, right? So the people that should be making the decisions aren't making the decisions. The least qualified to make the decisions are, and those people become very tied to conventional regular army, which hates special forces. And they try to enmesh themselves and to pacify the whims of regular army at the loss to special operations. And it creates a situation where they're slowly destroying special forces, and it's lowering the standards, and all of this is playing right into the hands of that, because currently they're trying to do this to MARSOC and the Marines. They're trying to do it in the Army. They've been trying to do it in the Army forever. And I can't comment in the Navy. I wouldn't imagine so, because the Navy doesn't have really many other combat arms units. But the Army, everything supports combat arms. So this is what they're doing. And if that was hard to follow, I apologize. Maybe Chris can clear some things up with that. But the Army wants to kill SF. That's the bottom line. They've wanted to do it for years, and this is all in that process.
There's some restructure that needs to be done. Um, part of the stuff that, in the beginning we weren't associated with a big army, and sometimes that we need to find that disconnect. We need to get it back. So I've always expressed that you know, not always when I went in, but when I first went to Special Forces, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it until I retired. But the point is this: I felt that SF kind of fell away a little bit from some of the core stuff that they really brought it to the beginning. And when you look at it and you do some research, I challenge you to do some research into this and see what SF was in the beginning. And looking at it now, you will realize that a lot of the skills um, have evolved, to something different, to generally the same, but it's the command structure. And I agree 100% on this with Matt, that the command structure needs to pull away from the regular Army, and we need to separate. We need to get off the post and have our own compound and work issues out, and then we better operate that way. That's just the way the guys work. It's a professional unit. That's what it is. So, and professionals need different things to be successful, and we don't need to be intermingled with the big Army, with anything else anymore. They've got their fingers in way too deep. They need to back out. And
Well,
our command structure is something that needs to be done.
here's a typical example of what Chris and I are talking about. When they moved 5th Special Forces Group to Fort Campbell back in 1988, they were supposed to be in an area of Campbell that was off by itself called Cav Country, right? That's what they call it now. But it was off by itself. That's where they were scheduled to be. Everybody says, why did they put them right smack dab in the center of the 101st, right? Why did they do that? Because that's got conflict written all over it. Well, the rumor is the commander at the time knew that if he was going to get his stars, right, he had to be seen. And who did he have to be seen by? The bigwigs, the 101st. So he moved into World War II era Barrett of buildings, and he put the teams on the 3rd floor, right? The teams with all the equipment and everything in buildings where elevators didn't work. And this is what they did to 5th Special Forces Group. And it was the commander who did that, the group commander. So it's kind of, people are starting to get a picture now. And I think, you've got to change the officer structure up in SF. I think people who need to be officers in SF are the experienced operators, and not, we're getting a question here. Do you think a butter bar should just come right into a team and get marks? Dakota, that is a good question, and I really haven't thought of that. I know maybe they did this maybe back in the day. Maybe. I mean, maybe there should be a selection process right out. So these guys, right from the very get-go, are indoctrinated into special operations out of the box thinking, and brought up.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a selection that they go through, and they have sort of a mentorship, if that be it. I really think a better suggestion than that, even though that's not a bad suggestion, because that's thinking outside the box a little bit right there. I think a better suggestion is for a abbreviated course to get team sergeants into those positions, because they need experience, and that's what's desperately needed. And if the officers are going to make the decisions that affect all of SF, you don't get to be a team sergeant without knowing how things work, not just having experience on the battlefield and the experience in dealing with units, with foreign units, and the experience on how the battle space is operated, right? But knowing how to deal and motivate with your team, and how to look out for your team, and those leadership skills that make a good team sergeant are, you can't gloss over and get that without the experience, the life experience that the team sergeants would have. So I really think a path needs to be made for team sergeants to step into these officer positions. Now, a lot of them have no desire in being an officer. Um, but I think if SF is going to be saved, they're going to have to come up with something that allows senior enlisted guys that have all the experience. Uh, get they're going to have to offer a way to get these guys into an officer position. Most of these guys have college degrees and master's degrees, anyways. I mean, it's not that they're less educated. SF has always been run by the enlisted. That's who runs SF, and the people who make all the decisions, unfortunately, the decisions that matter, are not enlisted. So, in my opinion, I think Chris agrees with me as well. I think the door needs to be opened for the experienced guys to go into those positions. And I think that would solve the problem. But your idea is also a very good one.
Yeah. Um, hey, we're about an hour and 15 in. So what
Yeah,
do you want
I,
to
I,
wrap it
I
up a
think
little bit? I
I
mean,
think we'll wrap it up.
yeah.
I wanna take a moment here. We lost somebody I'm really bummed about. Herman Cain passed away due to COVID-19, the Chinese flu. Um, I'm really upset about this. Herman Cain was a patriot and a great American, and this sort of hit me. Everybody knew that he was struggling with this, but it makes me so angry. I think America as a country is being a little bit too passive to what the Chinese have done with this virus. And we're now up pushing on 160,000 Americans dead because of this. And uh, I know we're learning more and more about this as we go along. And maybe next week we're going to talk a little bit about this whole cabal around hydrochloroquine and azithromycin and zinc and what they're doing to anybody who suggests this, including doctors. Doctors are being ruined because they suggest that this is an effective treatment. And somehow it's not politically correct to talk about that. I'm very disturbed at the pattern that's emerging here on all of this and the control of the diversity of ideas and speech too. But I really wanted to take a moment to recognize Herman Cain, and I think it's a tremendous loss. I think it's a tremendous loss to all Americans. I don't care. I don't care who you are. The guy was a patriot, and I think everybody owes him a debt of respect. And just a sad day to know that he's no longer with us. So, do you have anything you want to add, Chris?
I hate. Yeah, I agree with you. And what I heard tonight was even more disturbing about this ploy to say that uh, Mr. Kane was at the RNC. Am I saying that right?
No,
Is
he
that
went to
it?
the Trump rally in Oklahoma
Oh,
City,
okay,
and they're
okay,
trying to say this Trump is irresponsible, and because he held that rally, and somehow he's responsible for
yeah,
Herman Cain contracting.
yeah.
Um,
The spin is what gets me. Okay,
Nobody knows
that's
where
a
he got this, and
yeah.
that's
Come on, yeah,
the anger should be that the Chinese, through what they've done here, and I think it's pretty much out in the open what was going on here. I really do. I know there's a bunch of stuff that we're still learning on this, but they hid the fact that they had this. They restricted travel in their country, but allowed people to go internationally and spread this throughout the world. And I think not just the United States, but I think the world has been very, very passive on their response to a blatant, as far as I'm concerned, act of war uh, in what they've done. 150. That's we lost 65,000 people in Vietnam, roughly. We've lost 150,000 people to this since January, and if we don't just not just the United States as the world make China pay for this, okay, there is something wrong. There is something wrong. That is an evil empire over there that needs to be dealt with, and we're continuing to do business with them. They're continuing to set up their 5G. Huawei's setting up their 5G in Europe. In Italy, they're doing a deal. Of course, they own half of Italy. We need to really start thinking as Americans. We can do our own sort of protest. Do not buy Chinese products. Just don't, where you can. It's impossible not to buy Chinese products, okay? But where you can, and you can buy a product made, I don't care, anywhere else, preferably in America, an American-made product, do it. Do it. We've got to do something. I think our politicians are real flaccid in their response to all of this, and U.S. Chamber of Commerce is going to do what's best for them, not what's best for America, and they've bought a lot of these politicians off. But just Herman Cain's another example. 150 plus thousand Americans dead because of the Chinese. There needs to be a little bit of anger and outrage, and we need to push back. So with that being said, do you have anything you want to add, Chris?
No. Just follow us on our social media stuff. Like us.
Subscribe to our channel. Like
Yep.
the channel. We're supposed to push all of these things. But go to our website, www.panergiclife.com. We also have a foundation. And remember to live in freedom every day. And thank you very much for subscribing to our channel and watching.
All right. Well, everybody have a good evening.
Bye-bye.